Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something huge, kind of like an architectural project for personal change.
That's a great way to put it. We're trying to build a structure, a real framework for understanding how transformation actually happens.
Right. And we've gathered, well, quite a stack of sources. We're talking nearly a century and a half of psychology here.
Yeah, everything from Pavlov and, classical conditioning, Freud, all the way up to the latest in neuroscience, behavioral economics, even trauma research. It's a broad sweep.
Our goal is to synthesize all of this, to create something like a cohesive manual for real, sustainable change. We want to move way beyond just saying, try harder or have more willpower.
Absolutely. And what's really striking when you look at all these different fields, dog salivation on one end, complex human relationships on the other, they all kind of point to the same core challenge.
Which is?
The struggle of our own systems, our human system, to reorganize itself. We're built for stability, right? So change, real change, it requires a deliberate disruption of that balance.
Okay, so our mission today is to figure out what drives that disruption, what really pushes us forward. We'll look at the discomfort, like internal conflict, the subtle things that keep us stuck, maybe old habits or tricky relationship patterns.
Yeah, the inertia.
And critically, the internal architecture, the stuff deep in our nervous system that we need for resilience and, intentional growth.
So you, the listener, should walk away understanding the mechanics behind change, not just the motivational slogans. The how, not just the what.
Exactly. Let's dig in.
Mm.
All right, let's start with the engine, the thing that actually kicks off the change process. And maybe counterintuitively, that engine seems to be discomfort.
Specifically, cognitive dissonance. This is Leon Festinger's work back in the 50s.
Yeah.
And the core idea is, well, it's actually pretty simple.
We like consistency.
We strive for it. Consistency in our beliefs, our opinions, how we act. We want it all to line up.
Okay, and when it doesn't?
That's dissonance. When you hold two ideas that clash, or when your actions flat out contradict what you believe, that creates this internal friction. It's a real psychological discomfort.
Like an alarm bell going off in your head.
Kind of, yeah. It's a pressure telling you something's not right, something needs fixing. We're highly motivated to reduce that feeling.
And one of the most common places we feel this, apparently, is after we make a big decision. Post-decision dissonance.
Precisely. Think about choosing between two really good options, maybe 2 job offers or 2 houses. They're attractive, but you can only pick one. They're mutually exclusive.
Okay.
So you choose one, path A. And almost immediately, all the great things about path B, the one you rejected, suddenly seem brighter, more appealing.
Oh, I know that feeling. And the downsides of the one you picked suddenly seem bigger.
Exactly. That tension, that dissonance, it hangs around until you can resolve the conflict somehow.
But you can't undo the choice, so how do we resolve it?
We engage in what the sources call restructuring or reevaluation. You basically have to convince yourself psychologically that the choice you made was definitely the right one.
So you start emphasizing the good parts of your choice.
And downplaying the negatives.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you actively find fault with the option you didn't choose. It's not just making excuses. You genuinely start to change how you value those options in your mind.
This sounds like it connects to that paradox the sources mention about suffering. How misery after a choice can somehow lead to growth.
It's a critical link. If you go through something really tough, say a brutal training program or a difficult initiation, maybe even a painful breakup you chose to initiate, your brain has to justify that suffering.
Because if the suffering was for nothing,
Then you feel like a fool. The dissonance is huge. I suffered intensely versus the outcome wasn't worth it. To reduce that gap, your brain inflates the value of the outcome.
it decides this must be incredibly important if I went through all that for it.
Exactly. I must be suffering for something extremely valuable. And that mechanism can turn pain into perceived merit. It forces this positive internal shift, making the chosen path seem much more worthwhile.
That makes a lot of sense for justifying things to ourselves. But the research on dissonance gets even stranger with this idea of forced compliance.
Yes, this is probably the most counterintuitive finding. The classic experiment here is the $1 versus $20 study.
Right, remind us how that worked.
Okay, so students did this incredibly boring, repetitive task, really dull. Afterwards, they were asked to lie to the next person waiting, tell them the task was actually fun and interesting.
Okay, a little white lie.
But here's the twist. Some were paid $20 to tell the lie, which was a decent amount of money back then, a strong external reason. Others were paid only $1, a tiny incentive.
And the difference was key.
Huge. The group paid $20, felt fine about the lie. They had low dissonance. They thought, yeah, the task was boring, but hey, 20 bucks is 20 bucks. Good reason to fib. Their actual opinion of the task didn't change.
What the $1 group?
High dissonance. Lying for just $1. That felt insufficient. It clashed with their self-image as generally honest people. I lied versus I only got $1 for it versus I'm an honest person.
So how did they resolve that tension?
They couldn't easily justify the lie externally, so they changed their internal belief. They convinced themselves genuinely that the task wasn't really that bad after all. Maybe it had some interesting aspects they hadn't noticed before.
Wow. So the smaller the external justification for doing something that contradicts your beliefs, the more likely you are to actually change your beliefs to match the action.
Precisely. It shows that our behavior can literally shape our thoughts and attitudes, not always the other way around. If you want to shift someone's perspective, sometimes getting them to act as if they hold the new belief with minimal reward or pressure is incredibly effective.
That's a fundamental insight into belief change. Now, faced with all this internal discomfort, dissonance also drives another strategy, seeking confirmation, which brings up selection bias.
Absolutely. When dissonance is high, we feel this urge to find information, or even people, that support the belief or decision causing the conflict. We want to add consonant elements, things that agree with us, to feel more stable.
Which explains why we often end up in echo chambers, right? Choosing news sources or social media feeds that just tell us what we already think.
Exactly. It reinforces the loop, reduces the immediate discomfort, but it also stops us from learning or seeing the full picture.
And if you're constantly just reinforcing your own views, decision-making suffers. The sources offer a really practical way to check yourself on this.
Yeah, it's a great little mental tool. Whenever you feel that immediate rush of certainty, or you get defensive when someone challenges your idea, that's a warning sign. That's your bias protection kicking in.
So it's the corrective action.
Interrupt it. Ask yourself 2 specific questions. First, if I were actually wrong about this, what evidence or perspective would I be missing? Force yourself to think about contradictory information.
Okay, and the second question?
Who disagrees with me strongly on this, and what are their reasons? Actively seek out the opposing viewpoint and try to understand why they hold it. It forces you to engage with the dissonance instead of just shutting it down.
That kind of self-awareness seems crucial. And you can even build this into your planning before a decision using pre-commitment.
Yes, this flips the script. Instead of waiting for post-decision dissonance to make you rationalize, you tackle the bias up front. Let's say you're making a big choice, hiring someone, picking a strategy.
What do you do?
First, write down your objective criteria for making the decision before you even look at the options. What does success look like? What factors truly matter?
Get it down on paper first.
Then run what's called a pre-mortem. Imagine it's 6 months later, and the decision you made has completely failed. It's a disaster. Now write down all the reasons why it failed.
So you anticipate the potential pitfalls.
Exactly. And then you design safeguards now, today, to prevent those specific failure points. You're essentially using the anticipated pain of future failure, of future dissonance, to make your current plan stronger and your eventual choice much more robust.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got the engine. Internal conflict, dissonance, pushing us to reorganize. But just having the push isn't enough, right? You need structure.
You need rails for that engine to run on. And that brings us squarely into the realm of habits. James Clear puts it really well. Habits automate the basics of life.
Meaning they handle the routine stuff.
Exactly. So your conscious mind, your limited pool of mental energy is freed up. It can focus on new challenges, novel problems, creative thinking, instead of constantly deciding whether or not to brush your teeth.
Habits can serve that precious cognitive resource. And the mechanics clear lays out 4 steps, right?
Yeah, the habit loop. Cue, craving, response, and reward. The cue is the trigger, the thing that kicks it off.
Like seeing your running shoes by the door.
Right. The craving isn't for the action itself, usually, but for the feeling the reward will bring. You don't crave running. You crave the feeling of accomplishment or the endorphin rush afterwards.
And the response is the actual habit, the behavior.
Doing the run. And the reward is what satisfies the craving and tells your brain, hey, that worked. Let's remember this loop for next time.
So if you want to build a good habit or break a bad one, you need to understand and manipulate these parts.
Absolutely. Yeah. And a key practical insight is removing friction. If the path to the desired response is difficult or annoying, the habit probably won't stick.
Make it easy.
Make it obvious and easy. If you want to build a movement habit, yeah, lay out the clothes the night before. Maybe even sleep in them if you have to. Lower that activation energy.
And you can piggyback on existing habits too, right? Habit stacking.
That's a powerful one. You link a new habit you want to form the response to an existing habit that already has a solid cue. Like after I pour my morning coffee, existing cue, I will meditate for 1 minute, new response.
It anchors the new behavior to something already established in your routine.
Provides an immediate trigger in your environment and schedule. Very effective.
But even with good intentions and structure, habits often fail because of, well, procrastination, that conflict in time.
Ah, the classic struggle. The sources frame this really helpfully, not as a moral failure, but as the hot-cool state problem.
Explain that.
Okay, so when you're in a rational, calm, cool state, you make sensible plans for the future. I'm going to eat healthy this week. I'll start that big project tomorrow.
Sounds familiar.
But then the moment arrives. You're faced with the actual choice, and suddenly the hot emotion, the immediate desire, the impulse takes over.
The chocolate cake right in front of you versus the vague goal of losing weight.
Exactly. The immediate gratification, the pull of the easy or pleasurable thing right now, overrides the long-term goal you set when you were cool and rational. It's what economists call time inconsistency.
Which highlights why relying purely on internal willpower is often a losing battle.
It's notoriously unreliable, especially when that hot state kicks in. If procrastination is basically our impulsive self hijacking our rational self, we need outside help. We need safeguards.
External structure.
Precisely. And there's a fantastic experiment with students and deadlines that shows this powerfully.
Tell us about it.
They divided students into 3 groups for turning in papers. Group 1 had firm deadlines set by the professor throughout the semester, non-negotiable.
Okay.
Group 2 had 0 deadlines. They just had to turn everything in by the very last day of class. Total freedom.
Uh-oh. I could see where this is going.
And Group 3 got to choose their own deadlines throughout the semester. They had to pre-commit to their own schedule.
So external deadlines, no deadlines, or self-imposed deadlines. What happened?
The results were crystal clear. The students with the firm, externally set deadlines got the best grades, significantly better.
And the worst.
The group with no deadlines, they performed the poorest.
And the ones who set their own.
They fell somewhere in the middle. Better than nothing, but not as good as the externally imposed structure.
So even choosing your own structure isn't as effective as having real accountability from the outside.
It really proves the point. Structure often trumps self-control when you're battling that time inconsistency. It bypasses the weak moment, the hot state decision, and locks in the plan you made when you were thinking clearly.
This idea of external structure and how our nervous system responds to signals actually connects back to Pavlov's work on conditioning, doesn't it?
It does, surprisingly closely. Pavlov was looking at how the brain, specifically the cerebral cortex, forms and maintains these new connections, conditioned reflexes.
Like the dogs salivating at the bell.
Right. He saw the cortex as this amazing organ of nervous synthesis, making incredibly precise connections. But what's really relevant for change is his work on inhibition.
Not just learning to respond, but learning not to respond.
Exactly. Learning to differentiate, say, reacting to a bell but not reacting to a slightly different tone isn't just forgetting the second tone.
Yeah.
It requires the active development of internal inhibition.
The brain has to actively work to suppress a potential response.
Yes. It's a constant interplay, sometimes a conflict, between excitation, the drive to respond, and inhibition, the command to hold back.
And Pavlov found timing was crucial here.
Absolutely critical. He discovered that even a tiny shift in the timing between the signal, like the bell, and the reward, like the food, could determine whether the brain strengthened the connection, excitation, or actively started suppressing it, inhibition.
How so?
If the reward consistently came slightly after the signal, a stable conditioned reflex formed. But if the timing was off, or if the signal appeared repeatedly without the reward, the brain would begin to actively inhibit the response to that signal.
So if you want to build a stable habit, that reward step in the habit loop needs to be pretty immediate. Otherwise, the brain starts to shut down the connection.
That seems to be the neurological mechanism Pavlov uncovered. His dogs were essentially showing us why that tight coupling of response and reward is so vital for locking in a behavior. It validates Clear's 4 steps right down to the neural level.
Okay, so dissonance sparks the need for change, habits provide the structure, but what keeps the whole thing going long term? What's the fuel?
That's where motivation comes in, and Dan Pink's work offers a really important critique of the traditional approach, the carrots and sticks. He calls it motivation 2.0.
The idea that you reward good behavior and punish bad behavior. Seems logical.
It seems logical for simple, straightforward tasks. But Pink argues, based on a lot of research, that relying on these external performance-based rewards has serious downsides, especially for complex work.
What kind of downsides?
Well, for one, rewards are addictive. Once you offer a bonus for hitting a target, that bonus quickly stops feeling like a reward and starts feeling like just part of the deal. It becomes the expected baseline.
So to get the same boost in effort next time, you need an even bigger carrot.
Pretty much. It leads to this escalating cycle where you need ever larger incentives just to maintain the status quo. It's unsustainable.
Doesn't it sometimes backfire?
It absolutely can.
Ah.
For tasks that require creativity, problem-solving, or real cognitive engagement, studies show that focusing people on an external reward can actually narrow their focus and reduce their performance. They get fixated on the prize, not the process or the challenge.
So if carrots and sticks don't work well for the kind of work many of us do now, what's the alternative?
Pink calls it type I motivation. It taps into our intrinsic psychological needs. It's built on 3 pillars: autonomy, mastery, and purpose.
Okay, break those down.
Autonomy is our innate desire to be self-directed, to have control over our work and our lives. Mastery is the urge to get better at things that matter to us, to develop skills to improve.
And in purpose.
Purpose is the context for the other two. It's the yearning to contribute to something larger than ourselves, to feel like what we do matters in the bigger picture.
So the idea is that people who have autonomy are striving for mastery and feel a sense of purpose. They're the most motivated.
And they perform at the highest levels because the drive comes from within. The satisfaction is inherent in the work itself, not dependent on some external reward that can feel manipulative or quickly lose its power.
This idea of purpose. It feels important, but maybe a bit abstract.
It might seem that way, but historically, it's been an incredibly powerful driver. Think about major breakthroughs, the printing press, vaccines, major social movements. Often the spark wasn't profit, it was a deep-seated purpose.
People trying to solve a problem or serve a cause.
Exactly. Pink argues that in a healthy system, profit or reward should be seen as a byproduct of achieving a meaningful purpose, not the primary goal itself. If your daily work lacks that why, that connection to something bigger, eventually motivation is likely to fade. It feels hollow.
And sustaining the effort needed to pursue that purpose, especially when things get tough, that requires a certain mindset, doesn't it? This brings in Carol Dweck's research.
Yes, the fixed versus growth mindset, or as the sources here put it, the mastery-oriented mindset. The fixed mindset is the belief that your abilities, intelligence, talent are basically set in stone. You have a certain amount, and that's it.
So what happens when someone with a fixed mindset hits a difficult problem?
They tend to see it as proof of their limits. See, I'm just not smart enough for this. They give up more easily, often blame their lack of innate ability, and they might even see effort itself as a negative thing, something only people without talent need.
Which is obviously terrible for learning or achieving anything hard.
Absolutely. The mastery-oriented mindset or growth mindset is the opposite. It's the belief that abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work.
So challenges are seen differently.
Completely differently. Setbacks aren't taken as a personal indictment. They're seen as inevitable parts of the learning process, like guideposts showing you what you need to work on next. Effort is seen as the path to mastery, not a sign of weakness.
Purpose gives you the direction. The mastery mindset gives you the resilience to keep going when the road gets bumpy.
That's a great summary. You need both for sustained momentum.
Now, if we zoom out to the ultimate purpose, maybe, of happiness or well-being, Seligman and Haight's work gives us some clues on where to focus our efforts. They make a key distinction between external factors.
Right. They talk about conditions versus voluntary activities. Conditions are the circumstances of your life. Some you can't change, like your race or certain innate traits, and others you can change but tend to adapt to, like your income level or marital status.
Adapt to, meaning they don't bring lasting happiness.
Pretty much. This is the concept of hedonic adaptation. You get that promotion and raise or buy that bigger house, and yeah, there's an initial boost in happiness, but quite quickly, it just becomes your new normal. The positive feeling fades as you adapt.
But voluntary activities are different.
Yes. These are things you actively choose to do, things that require effort and attention, like learning an instrument, training for a race, starting a meditation practice, volunteering.
Why don't we adapt to those in the same way?
Because they aren't static conditions. They require ongoing engagement, focus, and effort. You have to keep showing up, keep practicing, keep learning. This continuous involvement seems to counteract the adaptation effect, offering a more sustainable path to increased well-being.
So investing energy in chosen activities holds more promise for lasting happiness than just changing external circumstances.
That's what the research suggests. And they also stress that true well-being isn't just about feeling good subjectively. It has objective components too,
Like what?
like the quality of your relationships, how others genuinely feel about you, like meaning feeling connected to and serving something bigger than yourself. An accomplishment actually achieving goals you set out to achieve. It's a richer picture than just fleeting positive emotion.
Okay, we've covered the engine of dissonance, the structure of habits, the fuel and motivation and purpose. Now we need to go deeper inside our own internal system. Because if our nervous system is constantly in a state of defense or alarm, none of the other stuff really matters, does it?
Not really. You can't build a stable structure on shaky ground. Self-regulation and, when necessary, healing are absolutely foundational. And a key starting point, maybe surprisingly, is self-compassion.
Which sounds nice, but maybe a bit soft.
It sounds soft, but Kristen Neff's research shows it's actually a powerful physiological regulator. She breaks it down into 3 essential interacting parts. You need all 3.
Okay, what are they?
First is mindfulness. This isn't about zoning out. It's about turning towards difficult feelings, pain, failure, inadequacy, and acknowledging them clearly without immediately running away or getting swept up in a huge dramatic story about them.
Just noticing, okay, I feel disappointed right now, without adding, and therefore I'm a total failure and always will be.
Exactly, just holding the feeling with awareness. The second part is common humanity. This is recognizing that suffering, making mistakes, feeling inadequate, these are universal human experiences. It's not just you.
It pulls you out of that isolating feeling of, why me, or I'm the only one who struggles like this.
Precisely. It connects you to others through shared vulnerability. And the third element is kindness, actively responding to your own suffering with warmth, support, and understanding, rather than harsh judgment or self-criticism.
Treating yourself like you would treat a good friend who is struggling.
That's a great analogy. And this kindness part has direct physiological effects. Self-criticism actually triggers your threat response. It ramps up the sympathetic nervous system, releases cortisol, puts you in fight or flight.
Stressing yourself out even more.
Right. Self-compassion, on the other hand, activates the parasympathetic nervous system. That's your rest and digest, tend and befriend system. It promotes feelings of calm, safety, and allows your body to regulate and restore itself.
So it's not just a nice idea, it's actively calming your nervous system.
It's a direct physiological intervention. And interestingly, the research shows this internal state has external consequences. It's an individual's level of self-compassion, not just their self-esteem, that predicts whether their romantic partners see them positively.
Really? How so?
Partners of self-compassionate people describe them as warmer, more supportive, more accepting. It makes sense, right? If you can handle your own flaws and failures with kindness, you're likely better equipped to handle your partner's imperfections with generosity too.
That connects directly to attachment theory, because relationships are where our internal regulation systems are constantly put to the test.
Oh, absolutely. The dynamic between anxious and avoidant attachment styles is a constant theme. You have the anxious person who craves deep intimacy, but lives in fear of rejection or abandonment.
Always scanning for signs of trouble.
Yes. And then you have the avoidant person who values independence and feels easily suffocated or overwhelmed when things get too close, too demanding.
And their interactions become this ongoing push-pull.
Often, yes.
Yeah.
A constant, sometimes unconscious negotiation for closeness versus distance. It can be exhausting for both.
The sources mention something really interesting for people with an anxious attachment style, that intense feeling, the butterflies, the obsession. It might not actually be love.
That's a challenging but crucial insight. That feeling of overwhelming intensity, preoccupation, and anxiety, what often gets labeled passionate love, might actually be the activation of their attachment system signaling threat or insecurity.
So it feels intense because it's actually anxiety.
In many cases, yes. The research suggests that secure, stable love feels much calmer, safer, more peaceful. So for someone anxious, the best bet is often to find a secure partner.
Why?
Because a secure partner's consistency and reliability doesn't constantly trigger that attachment anxiety. Things feel calmer. But here's the catch.
That calmness might feel boring, or like there's no spark.
Initially, yes. The anxious person might misinterpret the lack of drama and anxiety as a lack of attraction. They have to consciously override that old pattern and recognize the value of secure attachment, even if it feels less intense at first. Hold out for the calm.
And when conflict does arise, because it always does, how do securely attached people handle it? Or how should we handle it?
Effective communication becomes key. It's about expressing your legitimate needs clearly and respectfully, without attacking or blaming. The recommendation is to use I statements focused on observable behavior, feelings, and needs.
The I notice, I feel, I need formula.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
instead of, you're so dismissive, you never respect my opinion in front of your friends, it just triggers defensiveness.
You'd say.
Something like, I notice that sometimes when we're with your friends, you interrupt me before I finish my point. When that happens, I feel devalued and a bit embarrassed. I need to feel that my contributions are respected, maybe by letting me finish my thought.
It's specific, non-blaming, and states a clear need, much easier to respond to constructively.
Exactly. It keeps the conversation focused on solving the problem, not winning an argument.
Okay, let's tie all this internal regulation back to the deepest level. Trauma and the nervous system itself, because profound change often involves healing from past wounds.
Yes, and the perspective here is that healing trauma isn't just about talking about it or understanding it cognitively. It requires a fundamental shift at the neurophysiological level, renegotiating the experience within the nervous system.
This is where polyvagal theory comes in, mapping our autonomic nervous system.
Right. It describes our nervous system as having three main circuits, organized hierarchically based on evolution. The newest, most sophisticated circuit is the myelinated vagus nerve. This supports our social engagement system.
That's the state we want to be in.
Ideally, yes. It's the state of feeling safe, calm, connected, open to learning, capable of growth and healing. True transformation really only happens here.
Okay, what are the other two?
Below that is the older sympathetic nervous system. That's our mobilization system, fight or flight. High energy, ready for action, but also characterized by anxiety, anger, fear.
And the oldest, most primitive.
That's the unmyelinated vagus nerve. This governs the immobilization or freeze response. Think playing dead. It's a shutdown state associated with dissociation, numbness, hopelessness. It conserves metabolic resources in the face of overwhelming threat.
And trauma can essentially lock us into one of those defensive states, either hyper-aroused fight or flight or hypo-aroused freeze.
That's often what happens. The system gets stuck in a state of defense. So transformation, especially healing from trauma, involves helping the nervous system shift out of those defensive states and back into the safety and connection of the social engagement system.
How does that happen?
It relies heavily on cues of safety. The social engagement system involves the nerves controlling facial expression, vocal tone, listening. When we receive cues of safety from another person, a calm face, a soothing voice, attentive listening, it acts like a neural brake on the primitive defensive circuits.
So healing often happens in safe relationships.
Yes. It involves creating an environment of safety where the trauma story can be revisited and reconstructed, not just cognitively, but allowing the body's responses to complete and regulate. This transforms the emotional meaning of the memory and, quite literally, reorganizes the nervous system and sense of self.
This drive to reorganize, to create coherence, it seems incredibly fundamental. Oliver Sacks's work showed this too, right? Even with severe neurological damage.
Absolutely. Sacks wrote beautifully about patients with conditions like visual agnosia, not recognizing faces, or profound amnesia, Korsakoff syndrome. Even when their cognitive functions were fragmented, he observed this constant, powerful striving of the organism to preserve its identity,
To make sense of the chaos.
to reconstruct a narrative, a self, however fragmented from the available pieces. It highlights that we aren't just the sum of our functions or deficits. We are defined by this ongoing active struggle to organize experience, to find coherence, to maintain a sense of self against the boiling cauldron of contradictory impulses and experiences. That struggle is the process of shaping who we are. #outro read.
Wow. We've covered a huge amount of ground today, really charting the blueprints for change. We started way back with Festinger, showing how that internal clash, that dissonance, isn't the enemy, it's actually the necessary spark.
Right. It's the engine that pushes us to find a better alignment, a new structure.
And then we saw that harnessing that energy requires deliberate structure, automating behaviors through habits, making sure rewards are immediate, or even using external accountability like deadlines to overcome procrastination.
Yeah, building the rails for the engine. And then ensuring the fuel supply through intrinsic motivation, autonomy, mastery, and especially purpose. Finding that why.
But underpinning all of that is the state of our internal system. understanding our nervous system's hierarchy, recognizing cues of safety versus threat,
Yeah.
and using practices like self-compassion to actively regulate ourselves out of defense and into a state where growth is even possible.
Exactly. That shift from the primitive defense circuits to the social engagement system is critical. Mastery and transformation are fundamentally built on the body feeling safe enough to change.
This whole journey keeps highlighting a fundamental tension, doesn't it? The tension between our individual needs and our need for connection, for community. Freud pointed this out. We strive for individual happiness, but integrating into a group seems almost essential to actually achieving it.
That tension is always there. We're wired for connection, for belonging. The relationship research underscores that this true well-being includes objective relationship quality. It's not just about feeling good alone. We need those secure bonds. We need to integrate while also pursuing our own path.
So if integrating is necessary for happiness and security, but we also need autonomy and purpose, it leads to a final question for you, the listener.
Thinking about everything we've discussed, dissonance, habits, motivations, self-compassion, attachment needs, what are your essential boundaries? What specific non-negotiable needs must be met for you to maintain your authentic self, your sense of mastery and purpose, while still connecting and integrating securely with the important people or groups in your life?
Where's that line for you? Using those I notice, I feel, I need frameworks, perhaps, to define it.
Finding that balance where you're regulated and compassionate enough to connect authentically, but clear and boundaried enough to protect your core self and purpose, that's perhaps the ultimate architectural challenge in this ongoing project of change and growth.
A lot to think about. Thank you for diving deep with us today.